The deadly gun battle between police and a narco militia over a drug cartel suspect wanted here in the U.S.
The situation so out of control, authorities retreated and suspended the operation.
Mexican drug lord El Chapo's son, Ovidio Guzman, has been extradited to the United States on Friday. 33-year-old Guzman is going to face charges of trafficking fentanyl in America.
January 5th, 2023, the Sinaloa cartel tried to stop the Mexican police and military from arresting Ovidio Guzman Lopez, the son of notorious drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Although they succeeded killing 10 security forces, what happened next was something the cartel never expected. Here are 5 times cartels messed with the wrong cops.
Mexico says it is on the offensive against a drug trafficking organization. That organization calls itself the New Generation Cartel of Jalisco.
May 2015, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, known as CJNG, launched one of the most violent and coordinated attacks ever recorded in Mexico's drug war history. The CJNG was formed around 2010 by former members of the Sinaloa cartel under the leadership of Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, widely known as El Mencho. The group expanded rapidly and gained control of key regions in Mexico, including its home base of Jalisco. Authorities have linked the cartel to previous multiple violent incidents, including the special forces agents with explosive devices and the use of trained operatives to resist law enforcement. May 2015, a convoy of cartel members moved through Villa Purificacion in the state of Jalisco, using dirt roads with their headlights turned off. Their mission was to protect their leader, El Mencho, from capture. 4 helicopters belonging to the Mexican Air Force and federal police were conducting aerial surveillance of the area. As one of the helicopters passed over the convoy, CJNG opened fire and struck it with a Russian-made RPG-27 rocket launcher. The helicopter, a Cougar EC-725, carried 18 personnel. After it was hit, the aircraft spun in the air, lost control, crashed, and burst into flames. The crash resulted in the deaths of 9 officers, including 8 soldiers from the Mexican Army and 1 member of the federal police. Many of the soldiers belonged to the elite Special Forces unit, known as the Cuerpo de Fuerzas Especiales. Several other passengers were seriously injured and taken to military hospitals. Over the following days, more died from their wounds, increasing the death toll. In fact, the crash was so terrible that the government had to use DNA testing to identify the bodies that were torn apart by the explosion. The helicopter takedown marked the first time a Mexican criminal group had successfully used a rocket-propelled grenade to bring down an aircraft belonging to the military. However, the CJNG did not stop at the helicopter attack. As part of their operation to resist law enforcement, the cartel executed a long series of violent acts across Jalisco and 3 neighboring states. They set up roadblocks using burning vehicles, torched banks and gas stations, and ambushed security forces. In total, 15 people died and 19 more were injured in these coordinated strikes. The cartel used hundreds of operatives to carry out the plan, signaling a new level of organization and firepower. One of the vehicles recovered by police was equipped to mount an M60 machine gun. Barrett, .50 caliber rifles and thousands of rounds of ammunition were also found. May 4th, 2015, the Mexican government declared an all-out offensive against the CJNG in response to the attack. Authorities pledged that the full force of the state would be deployed in Jalisco, and they began deploying more personnel and increasing surveillance in the region. The goal was to capture or those responsible and to severely disrupt the cartel's command structure. The Mexican government also shifted its focus to target CJNG more aggressively than other cartels, including Sinaloa. Years later, in August 2018, Mexican federal police captured 14 suspected CJNG members as part of Operation Titan Shield. 6 of the men were directly involved in the downing of the helicopter. They were arrested on a ranch located east of where the helicopter was originally shot down. Authorities recovered high-powered weapons during the operation, including an M60 machine gun and a Barrett .50 caliber rifle, along with 2 stolen vehicles that had been modified for combat purposes. October 27, 2022, the weapons used in the attack were traced back to the United States. Investigators confirmed that the .50 caliber gun used to shoot down the helicopter had been purchased in Portland, Oregon. A joint investigation between Mexico and the U.S. soon led authorities to Eric Flores Elortegui, a U.S. citizen born in Durango, Mexico. Elortegui bought the weapon in Rainier, Washington, and falsely stated that it was for personal use. He had also been under the surveillance by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, ATF, for making straw purchases of firearms and illegally exporting them. El Ortegui is currently on the ATF's most wanted list and is believed to be at large.
$20 million for the capture of a diabolical man. Tonight, the feds are putting the pressure on to find the cartel leader who tortured and murdered a local DEA agent.
Rafael Caro Quintero, RCQ, the accused mastermind behind the brutal murder of DEA Special Agent Enrique Kiki Camarena, was brought to the United States to face justice.
Kiki always wanted to do the right thing.
When Mexican drug cartels crossed paths with law enforcement, there have been times when they underestimated the power and reach of the law. One of the most defining moments in this ongoing battle came when the Guadalajara cartel targeted a U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration agent named Enrique Kiki Camarena. Their decision to eliminate him triggered a fierce and relentless response from the United States that shook the cartel to its core. Born on July 26, 1947 in Mexicali, Mexico, Enrique Camarena moved with his family to Calexico, California. After serving in the U.S. Marine Corps, he joined the police force and later became a special agent for the DEA. By 1980, Camarena had transferred to Guadalajara, Mexico, where he began undercover work focused on the growing drug trade. At that time, drug trafficking in Mexico was expanding rapidly due to weakened local enforcement and reduced U.S. involvement in aerial eradication programs. The Guadalajara cartel, led by Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo, and Rafael Caro Quintero, emerged as one of the most powerful drug trafficking organizations in Mexico. During his time in Guadalajara, Camarena developed a strong network of informants and played a critical role in exposing large-scale drug plantations. In 1982, his collaboration with an informant led to the discovery of a large marijuana plantation near Venegas in San Luis Potosí. Mexican authorities raided the site in September, destroying over 4,000 tons of high-quality marijuana. This dealt a significant blow to the cartel's operations, but that was only the beginning. In 1984, acting on intelligence from the DEA, 450 Mexican soldiers destroyed a massive marijuana plantation known as Rancho Buffalo in Allende, Chihuahua. Spanning over 1,000 hectares, this plantation had an estimated annual production worth $8 billion. This time, however, the cartel suspected Camarena was behind the leak and decided to eliminate him. February 7, 1985, Camarena left the U.S. consulate in Guadalajara for lunch with his wife. As he approached his car, a van pulled up, and he was abducted by corrupt Mexican police officers working for the cartel. That same day, Alfredo Zavala Avalar, a Mexican pilot and DEA asset, was also kidnapped. Both men were taken to a house owned by Caro Quintero at 881 Lope de Vega Street in Guadalajara. For 30 hours, Camarena was tortured in an attempt to extract information about DEA operations. A physician named Humberto Alvarez Machain was allegedly brought in to keep him alive during the torture until he was killed 2 days after he was kidnapped. However, it was not until March 5, 1985, that Camarena's body, along with Zavala's, were found wrapped in plastic in a remote area of Michoacán. His skull had been punctured and his ribs broken. The murder of Kiki Camarena triggered a powerful response from the United States. The DEA launched Operation Leyenda, the agency's largest homicide investigation at the time. The U.S. government also pressured Mexican authorities to bring the culprits to justice. Soon after, Fonseca Carrillo and Caro Quintero were arrested in Mexico. Caro Quintero was captured in Costa Rica in 1985 and extradited to Mexico. Felix Gallardo, however, remained protected by political connections and was not arrested until April 8, 1989. The U.S. also pursued others believed to be involved. Humberto Alvarez Machain was abducted by bounty hunters in Mexico and brought to the United States. He was arrested but later released by a judge due to a lack of evidence. His case reached the U.S. Supreme Court, which ruled against him when he attempted to sue the U.S. government for unlawful arrest. Other suspects, including Juan Ramon Mata Ballesteros, Javier Vázquez Velasco, Juan José Bernabé Ramirez, and Ruben Zuno Arce, were tried in the U.S. and found guilty of kidnapping Camarena. Zuno Arce, a brother-in-law of former Mexican President Luis Echeverría, had well-known ties to corrupt officials, and his conviction exposed the extent of political protection the cartel leaders enjoyed. Mexican officials were also implicated in destroying evidence related to Camarina's murder. The case severely strained U.S.-Mexico relations for years. After serving time in prison, some cartel leaders were released. In 2013, Caro Quintero was unexpectedly freed by a Mexican court, a decision that outraged U.S. authorities and led to a renewed international manhunt. Although Quintero went into hiding, he was recaptured in July 2022. And on February 27, 2025, he was extradited to the United States to face charges in the Eastern District of New York for his role in Camarina's torture and murder, as well as ongoing drug trafficking crimes. During his first court appearance, over 100 DEA agents were present. Also, in a symbolic moment, Camarina's handcuffs were placed on Caro Quintero at the end of the arraignment hearing. Fonseca Carrillo was released after serving his sentence in Mexico. Felix Gallardo remained in prison and faced additional time after a retrial increased his sentence by 37 years. The fall of the Guadalajara cartel following Camarina's murder was a major breakthrough in the Mexican drug war. But while the cartel's top leadership was dismantled, its former Emoy, embers, and infrastructure later gave rise to new organizations such as the Sinaloa, Tijuana, and Juarez cartels, which continued to influence the drug trade.
The driver, Special Agent Jaime Zapata of Brownsville, Texas, was shot several times in the chest and
Is this a sign that Americans are being targeted just as tourists travel there for spring break?
February 15, 2011, two U.S. Homeland Security Investigation Special Agents, Jaime Jorge Zapata and Victor Avila, were driving through San Luis Potosí, Mexico. Assigned to U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, both agents were on official duty, traveling from Laredo, Texas to Mexico City in a government-issued armored Chevrolet Suburban with diplomatic plates. Zapata, born May 7, 1978 in Brownsville, Texas, had built a respected career in law enforcement. After graduating from the U.S. Border Patrol Academy in 2006, he served in Yuma, Arizona, on the Human Smuggling and Trafficking Unit and later joined the Border Enforcement Security Task Force. His work disrupted major criminal networks, drawing attention from dangerous cartels operating across the U.S.-Mexico border. Zapata's assignment in Mexico was part of a broader effort to combat the smuggling of drugs and weapons. Though his presence in the country was temporary, it placed him in a vulnerable position. The vehicle's diplomatic plates offered some recognition, but in cartel-controlled territory, such signs meant little. As the agents drove along Highway 57, a well-traveled federal highway connecting Mexico City and Monterrey, they noticed two SUVs following closely behind at high speed. The behavior of the drivers was aggressive, and soon the convoy was under attack. One of the SUVs sped ahead while the other began firing at the agent's vehicle. As gunfire continued, Avila attempted to communicate with the attackers by cracking the window and identifying themselves as U.S. diplomats. One of the gunmen, who had a rifle, approached the vehicle, opened the driver's side door, and shot Zapata at close range. Luckily, when Zapata shifted the gear to park, the doors locked automatically, preventing the assailants from pulling him out. However, the attackers still did not back off. The agents continued to plead with the gunmen, identifying themselves again as American diplomats. Their words were met with more bullets. Nearly 100 rounds from rifles and handguns were fired at the Suburban, leaving both agents critically wounded. Despite being shot 3 times, Zapata managed to shift the vehicle into drive and sped away. However, his injuries were too severe, and he collapsed behind the wheel. Avila, shot in the leg, was able to call for help. A Mexican federal police helicopter responded shortly after, but by the time it arrived, Zapata had already died from his wounds. Avila, on the other hand, was airlifted to a hospital in Houston, Texas for treatment. The attackers were later identified as members of Los Zetas, a cartel known for its extreme violence and military-style tactics. Investigators discovered that the gunmen had set up a fake military checkpoint along the highway, wearing camouflage uniforms and heavily armed. The ambush was said to be deliberate. Despite claims by the gunmen that they mistook the agents for rival cartel members, evidence from the scene and testimony from Avila suggested otherwise. The presence of diplomatic plates, along with the agents' repeated identification as U.S. officials, left little doubt that the attackers were fully aware of who they were targeting. The murder of Jaime Zapata triggered immediate coordination between U.S. and Mexican authorities. Within months, several suspects were arrested, including Jesus Enrique Rejon Aguilar, a top leader in Los Zetas, and the regional boss in the state where the attack occurred. Further investigation also revealed that the weapons used in the ambush had been purchased illegally in the United States. One of the firearms, a semi-automatic WASR-10 rifle used to kill Zapata, was traced back to Dallas, Texas. It had been bought by Otilio Osorio, a known straw purchaser. The gun had been smuggled into Mexico along with several other rifles. This revelation angered Zapata's family and lawmakers, many of whom questioned the oversight of U.S. federal agencies. According to them, the weapon that Zapata should never have left U.S. soil. In the aftermath, 7 people connected to the attack were extradited from Mexico to face trial in the United States. 2017, 2 of them, Jose Garcia Soto and Jesus Ivan Quezada Pina, were convicted of murdering a federal law enforcement officer and sentenced to life in prison. While the case seemed closed, in February 2020, a federal appeals court in Washington, D.C. overturned part of their convictions. The court ruled that the federal murder statute used in the case did not apply outside the U.S. Since Zapata was killed in Mexico, the law technically did not cover his murder. As a result, the original double life sentences were dismissed. Despite the setback, other charges still stood. Garcia Soto and Quezada Pina were convicted of attempted murder and firearms violations, which carried heavy penalties, including up to 20 years for attempted murder and potential life sentences for the weapons offenses. Still, the legal loophole exposed a serious gap in U.S. law regarding protection for federal agents overseas. Nevertheless, in tribute to Zapata's sacrifice, a street in Brownsville, Texas was renamed in his honor. But the real tribute came in the form of tightened cooperation between U.S. and Mexican authorities, increased scrutiny on illegal firearm sales, and a renewed push to ensure that those who harm U.S. personnel abroad are fully brought to justice.
The deadly gun battle between police and a narco militia over a drug cartel suspect wanted here in the U.S.
The situation so out of control, authorities retreated and suspended the operation.
Mexican drug lord El Chapo's son, Ovidio Guzman, has been extradited to the United States on Friday. 33-year-old Guzman is going to face charges of trafficking fentanyl in America.
January 5th, 2023. Mexican authorities launched an early morning operation in the northwestern city of Culiacan, Sinaloa, to arrest Ovidio Guzman Lopez, the son of notorious drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Ovidio, known as El Raton, or the Mouse, had long been accused of running a faction of the Sinaloa cartel alongside his brothers, collectively referred to as Los Chapitos. But what followed after his arrest proved that the cartel was ready for war, and that they had messed with the wrong cops. The operation to capture Ovidio was no small task. It came after 6 months of intelligence gathering by Mexico's security forces. Once located, Ovidio was taken by military plane to Mexico City. However, the Sinaloa cartel wasted no time retaliating. They unleashed a wave of violence across Culiacan and other parts of the state. Armed groups set vehicles on fire, blocked roads, and ambushed security forces. In a bid to stop Ovidio's transfer, cartel gunmen even attacked military and civilian aircraft at the Culiacan airport. A commercial passenger plane was struck by gunfire, and 2 military aircraft were also hit, forcing emergency landings. By the end of the day, 29 people were dead, including 10 soldiers and the other policemen. An additional 35 soldiers were also wounded, and 21 cartel members were later arrested, though the government confirmed that no civilians were killed. The scale of the violence made headlines around the world. Despite these attacks, Mexican forces held their ground. In fact, the military presence in Sinaloa was reinforced with 1,000 more troops to stabilize the region and ensure Ovidio's continued detention. This was not the first time Ovidio had been captured. On October 17, 2019, he was briefly arrested in Culiacan, but within hours, the Sinaloa cartel launched an overwhelming counterattack. Gunmen took hostages, blocked roads, and turned the city into a war zone. Faced with the threat of massive civilian casualties, the government released Ovidio. That decision was heavily criticized, and it became a point of humiliation for the administration of President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who admitted that the move was to prevent further loss of life. As a result, the 2023 arrest was a second chance to correct that failure, and this time, they didn't back down. After the violence, the United States quickly moved to formalize its extradition request. On February 28, 2023, Mexican authorities confirmed that the U.S. government had asked for Ovidio's extradition to face multiple charges, including trafficking methamphetamine, fentanyl, heroin, marijuana, and cocaine, as well as money laundering and murder. Also, in April 2023, U.S. prosecutors unsealed detailed indictments against him and his brothers.
The indictment filed in Chicago and several other cities today says the Chapitos made sure nothing and no one stopped the proliferation of their fentanyl ring.
The documents laid out how the Chapitos shifted the cartel's focus to synthetic drugs, especially fentanyl, and operated nearly a dozen meth labs in Sinaloa. They aimed to flood the U.S. market with cheap, potent drugs. The documents also alleged brutal murders carried out on Ovidio's orders, including that of a singer who declined to perform at his wedding, and multiple informants. September 16, 2023, after months of legal delays and increased security concerns, Ovidio Guzman Lopez was finally extradited to the United States. He was taken from a high-security prison in Mexico and flown across the border to face justice. The capture of Ovidio Guzman came years after his father, El Chapo, was convicted following a lengthy trial that exposed the inner workings of the cartel in 2019.
This is the moment Marines raided a property in Mexico, leading to the arrest of the most wanted drug lord in the world.
Joaquin El Chapo Guzman is the former leader of the Sinaloa cartel, a transnational criminal organization estimated by U.S. law enforcement to have smuggled over 1,000 tons of cocaine, marijuana, methamphetamines, and heroin into the United States. Under his leadership, the cartel grew into one of the world's most powerful drug trafficking organizations. The cartel's hitmen were known to kidnap, torture, and kill members of rival gangs to maintain control. Its members also bribed police officers and high-ranking politicians in Mexico and across Central America to ignore drug shipments or alert the group of upcoming raids. After El Chapo gained global notoriety for escaping prison twice in Mexico before being captured and extradited to the U.S. in 2017, he is now serving a life sentence in a high-security U.S. prison. Following his sentence, his sons took over parts of the operation and expanded into synthetic drugs like fentanyl. Just like the arrest of his father, Ovidio's extradition was a major blow to the cartel and a major win for both Mexican and U.S. authorities. Despite the cartel's brutal attempts to derail his capture and extradition, including attacks on aircraft, mass shootouts, and citywide chaos, the extradition went through. Once in the United States, the full weight of the law came down on Ovidio. July 11, 2025, Ovidio Guzman Lopez pleaded guilty in a U.S. federal court. He admitted to trafficking large amounts of drugs into the U.S., contributing to the ongoing opioid epidemic. As part of the plea deal, he also pleaded guilty to money laundering and weapons offenses tied to his role in the cartel. Although the full details of the agreement were not publicly disclosed, it was reported that Ovidio agreed to cooperate with U.S. authorities. He is also believed to be providing critical insider information about the Sinaloa cartel's operations. His cooperation could offer law enforcement a rare glimpse into the cartel's inner workings. The plea agreement also triggered speculation that Ovidio may be working to protect other family members or even reduce his own sentence. Ovidio's sentencing has, however, been postponed, pending his cooperation.
Entre civiles armados presuntamente pertenecientes al crimen organizado esta tarde en la localidad del Champal.
June 3, 2025, 5 police officers were killed during an ambush in Frontera Comalapa, a town in the southern Mexican state of Chiapas, bordering Guatemala. The officers, Guillermo Cortés Morales, Jesus Sanchez Perez, Joel Martinez Perez, Brenda Lisbeth Tuala Blanco, and Pedro Hernandez Hernandez, were on patrol when they were suddenly attacked by an armed group. Their patrol vehicle was set on fire and later found completely burned out. Chiapas had already been experiencing high levels of violence due to an ongoing territorial war between Mexico's 2 most powerful drug cartels, the Sinaloa cartel and the Jalisco New Generation cartel, CJNG. Frontera Comalapa, located along a strategic trafficking route near the Guatemala border, had become a major smuggling hub for both drugs and migrants. As violence escalated in the region, local and federal forces increased their presence in the area. In fact, over 1,000 officers were deployed to restore order and prevent further bloodshed. It was during this time that the 5 police officers were killed following the ambush. Authorities acted immediately. The Chiapas Security Secretariat announced the arrest of a man identified as Jorge N., who was found hiding in weeds about a kilometer from the crime scene. He was carrying an AK-47 rifle, a backpack with military-style uniforms, and extra ammunition. Though officials withheld details about other suspects at the time, the arrest was the beginning of the crackdown on the cartel group believed responsible for the attack. Just days after the ambush, officers encountered members of the same criminal group again. On June 9, 2025, a joint force of Chiapas State Police and federal officers was attacked during another patrol in Frontera Comalapa. The repeated attacks on law enforcement by CJNG were a bold strategy by the cartel to challenge state authority and dominate contested territory. But this time, the officers fought back. In the exchange of gunfire, 4 suspected cartel members were killed. Authorities also confirmed that the suspects belonged to the CJNG. Security forces seized 4 trucks, 3 AK-47 rifles, and additional weapons. They also recovered some vehicles, one of which was riddled with bullet holes. While authorities have not released additional names of suspects aside from Jorge N., investigations are ongoing. In addition to this, security also remains tight in the region, and more arrests are expected as law enforcement agencies continue operations.